This is Stockport as it is was in 2011, and we're taking a tour of the town, comparing it what it is now with what it was in 1966. Here's Asda, built in the 70s, regarded as a rather ugly building, but obviously very effective. Roughly opposite Sainsbury's, also built at about that time. And here's the beginning of the River Mersey. This is the Tame, and it joins the Goyt at this point. We're now looking at the Peel Centre, which is an extension of Mersey Way, also built during the 70s. Warren Street, with the shuttle bus that goes around the town between the station, the town hall and the shopping centre. And here's the beginning of Mersey Way, built over the beginning of the Mersey in the early 60s, one of the earlier shopping centres to be built. But there's an old part of the town. This is Underbank, with some quite ancient buildings. This is the NatWest building, which is quite historic. As you can see, aircraft flying overhead, and some of the brows or bruises they're called locally have some interesting buildings in them. The old market hall that's had a charter since the 1200s, and St Peter's Church there. Winters, which was a jeweller's but is now a wine bar, and you're looking at the underbanks here, and a very complex area of the town in the old part of it. The route that went through the town before the bypass was built in the 1900s. The old part of the town doesn't do so well these days, as it used to perhaps. It's a banking area. That's the Three Shires pub. Some modernistic, brutalistic buildings have been built, but some nice pedestrianisation. Manchester Airport is a dominant factor of life in this area. Mersey Way was done up about some 15 years ago. It's a bit of a failure in that nearly 30% of the shops are closed as at the late 2011. One of the worst in the country. In fact, it's under one of Mary Porter's £100,000 to try and do it up. Here we're looking at Mersey Square with the Plaza Super Cinema, built in 1938, been restored with a £7 million grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund. Stockport Village, where you can see the word outline, and we're panning round to the front of Mersey Way and Mersey Square. The River Mersey runs right underneath us. Wellington Road South, one of the first bypasses in the country. Sorry, Wellington Road North that was, and some of the office blocks in central Stockport, and a quick glimpse of the viaduct. This is the new town hall, if you can call it that, built in the 70s, brutalistic, concrete, and an even newer bit built in 2010, called Fred Perry House, after the most famous person from Stockport. And here's where the wags buy their cars. Lamborghinis, £150,000 each, War Memorial and Stockport College. First degrees these days from Huddersfield and John Moores. And our 1908 town hall, which was built in an area on the A6, which was full of slums at one time when it was first built. And the Royal Infirmary, which is now Department of Work and Pensions. But this is interesting. This is Lancashire Hill. Now, in the earlier film made in 1966, this was slums being knocked down back to backs. This has been done up and clad again, having been infested with cockroaches in the 80s. 18-storey, two-tower blocks here with fine views from the top, overlooking the green belt, which comes right to the centre of the town, Reddish Vale Country Park. And this is looking south along the original road that goes through Stockport from London to Carlisle, the A6. Pendlebury Hall was the owned by a fairly wealthy businessman of those times. And the motorway running right through the middle of the town, the M60, built as part of the Manchester Circular Orbital Route, well over 100,000 vehicles a day on it. Another shot of Pendlebury Hall, a very busy road, cutting right through the town centre. In the distance there is not only the A6, that sloping road, but the main line from London to Manchester. Here's the confluence of the rivers Goyt and Tame, to make the River Mersey, and that pylon you saw there is the beginning of Reddish Country Park, River Tamer, the country park 25 miles long going up into the Pennines. And you can see the River Mersey is a fairly substantial river at this point. This is the tame part of it, and you can see flood waters do rise quite a bit. Now we're some way up the River Tame at the Green Gym in Reddish Country Park. It's an allotment, that's a posh word for an allotment. But an interesting thing here, this was an area that was going to be sold off by the Tory government in Thatcher's time, but Christopher Chope, the minister at the time, decided to let it go to the council. There's the Manchester to Sheffield main line through Marple, and here's the visitor centre. Beautiful countryside within only about 45 miles of the city centre of Manchester, and it's a very pleasant place to be. Here's a bridge that the GMC built across it, cost £100,000. I remember that back in the beginning of the 80s. Lots of horse riding and so forth goes here between two fairly deprived areas of Bridlington and Reddish, but lovely countryside nevertheless. Visitor Centre has all sorts of things, and here's some original cottages opposite the Reddish Vale farm, which is owned by the council and has now become an establishment for horse riding, but also for a coffee shop, tea centre, and where people can see alpacas and other kinds of small animals. That building in the distance is a mill. We're looking at South Reddish Station here. One train a week goes through this station from Stockport to Staley Bridge. Never comes back. But there's a supermarket in the centre of Reddish on the right hand side there. Holdsworth Mill, built in 1865 by Henry Holdsworth, the Scotsman, who made his name in Reddish with one of the biggest spinning mills in the country, 250,000 spindles. Latterly, John Myers mail order, more recently been restored with millions of pounds from the Heritage Lottery Fund and from the EU. That's the school built by Holdsworth and the vicarage built by Holdsworth. We're coming up to the Grade 2 starred listed church, also built by Holdsworth, St Elizabeth's in Reddish. A fine building actually, with Holdsworth Park in front of it. That's the mill I used to work in, the building right in front of you. Holdsworth Mill built in the century in the 70s. Won a design award from the RABA. It's now the apprentice school for Stockport College. That building there was where I worked first. That's New Mill, Cotton Mill, Reddish Spinning Company. This is one of the typical entries in Reddish. Maybe a Morgan, and the town centre, Holdsworth Square, believe it or not, with a clock still dedicated to Henry Holdsworth. And one of the other industrial areas in North Reddish, Station Road.
Okay, keep going.
Lots of factories here long since gone. Hayward Cranes, Roland Grinders. But there is one left, Elsa Waste, which is a recycling company. It sends plastic bottles to China, recycles cardboard, and this is the border of Stockport. This is actually in Manchester, on the border of the railway that went to somewhere in the Manchester area. And this is an interesting factory. It's a very high-tech place, all automated, makes parts for Boeings and for Airbus. That building in the distance was the Beetham Tower, 600-foot building in Manchester. We're looking at the Manchester border here. Wayland Avenue, new building going on in the latter part of the 2010s. But this is the gatehouse for Sir Charles Reynolds, the chairman of Reynolds Chains, which is behind this building, and in fact just down this thing. Lovely countryside now, all houses. The Reynolds Chain factory long gone, and the Tesco took the place of it. Victorian